Welcome to the Long Strange Trip. I'm Josh, the host of the show. We're going to dig into 6 areas together, finding real work-life integration instead of that brutal 95-5 split too many business owners live with. We're going to approach retirement as an actual reinvention rather than just stopping work. And we're facing death honestly and avoiding PTSD around it. We're also building resilience when life throws us curveballs. We're sharing wisdom across generations. And finally, we're understanding the patterns that show up in all our transitions. I'm not coming at this as an expert. I'm a fellow traveler, figuring this stuff out in real time, especially now as I navigate my own dual cancer diagnosis at 73. Welcome to the Long Strange Trip. I'm glad you're here. Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick, and you're at the Long Strange Trip podcast. My guest today is Susan Bradley. Susan and I have been friends for, I think, close to 20 years, but I can't remember the exact date. Susan is the founder of the Sudden Money Institute, which is now the Financial Transitionist Institute. And she is one of the experts in this country on transitions. And Susan's been talking about a thing called liminality for a very long time now. And I've been writing about it a bit in some of my long form posts. And I thought it'd be really fascinating for us to hear about what liminality is and how do we use it and how is it something that we need to become more aware of. So let's bring Susan on and we'll start the conversation. Hey, Susan, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks. It's so nice to be with you for this conversation. Thanks for the invite.
My pleasure. And I think you're the only person I know who can discuss this intelligently. So we'll go with that. So what is liminality?
Well, liminal means threshold or the in-between. So easy way to think of it as the threshold between two spaces. You're in one space and you go through a door and a threshold. That time that you're there before you're in the next space is a liminal in-between time. In architecture, liminality shows up in an airport. An airport is not built to be lived in. It's to pass through, to go from one destination to another. In life, we all go through liminal times. It is universal, but it's rarely seen, named, understood, and embraced.
So why do you think that's true?
I think some of the ancient cultures had ritual and process for going from being a girl to a woman or a boy to a man, or going through different important stages within a community where you have to step out of the community, do some work, and then come back into the community. In our world, and particularly the Western world, I think it's pretty much the same actually from what I know of Eastern cultures, there's a tendency to want to keep moving through life. Don't pause. Don't stop. When life changes, get back on track and going. I think the pull from nature is to take advantage of the in-betweens from the time that you were two, you were married, and now you're one, either through divorce or through there. Instead of just getting back to the way it was, you never go back, you go forward. That's when, or you get stuck. And most people don't like the in-between. A business owner, successful business owner, you know this so well personally. It's one thing to run a business, sell a business for success, whatever that means. And then what? There's that sense of disorientation, not being there yet, not being what I was, not being what I will be. It's the in-between. So our culture doesn't like it. Our culture generally promotes expediting through these change events. And by doing so, I think you miss some of the great gifts and opportunities in life, although they come with discomfort, disorientation, ambiguity, a lot of things that most people don't want. Uncertainty. So we don't have a culture for embracing uncertainty.
So how do we learn to take advantage of this? Because in my experience, the liminal space is incredibly important. And we need to have a way of, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Um, Celebrating in that world, because it's where you actually learn stuff about yourself, I think.
Yeah, if you find your way to move, I want to say carefully, but it's not being careful. If you're willing to allow that uncertainty to just be there, one of the great benefits is, yes, you learn new things about yourself, but you see possibilities that really didn't have much clarity if we saw it at all. We sang in the transition work, we started with sudden money, and we were looking at what happens when people have a sudden financial event, up or down, and how when money changes, life changes when money changes. So we got that. And we studied change. Change is situational, but something happens after change, and that's the transition, the transit from A to B. We learned that from Bill Bridges and from others, and we put our attention on it as financial planners, creating process for the financial planning profession. I think we did a pretty good job from that perspective. We created something that hadn't existed. But it took a long time for us to really understand what we call passage stage. You can anticipate change, you have to manage change when it happens. We call it ending stage. And then there's this passage stage. All of the transition work that we have examined in our lit review all have some version of a passage stage. Bruce Littman calls it messy middle. People have different names. I think Bill Bridges called it new normal. So different names. It took me a while to get liminality.
Yes.
To understand what that was. That was kind of out there.
It seems to me liminality is the journey. Whereas in this country, we're so focused on goals of getting to point A or going from point A to point B, we really miss that whole area of the journey. And in my experience, in fact, I just wrote about this, is the journey is far more important than the destination. Because the truth is, once we get to a destination, we say, okay, is that all there is? And if we can pay attention to the journey, which is liminal space, I would think, it would make it your life becomes much more rich.
There's no question in my mind. The challenge is that it is, by definition, even from the anthropology looked at liminality and ancient cultures, as well as our current culture. As you know, we have an anthropologist as part of our training team, and she sees things quite differently than a financial planner would, even though she's been in the financial services world for about 15 years. So she understands both. The fact that we actually had tools and process and a lot of willingness to be deep thinking around this liminal space was shocking to her. And she reports back to her anthropology people around. She does these different conferences and study groups, and they're all shocked that we have process for the liminal space. They call it back to liminality, meaning changes on top of each other. In financial planning, they typically say, oh, we do that. We already do that. Because they're looking at numbers and technical and making sure that they're all right. And as long as the client hasn't imploded in front of you, it's probably okay. So to honor that space, right, I think in our profession of financial planning, it's one of the versions of expedite. Just get to the other side. The numbers determine the well-being.
I was having a conversation with Rick Keller a couple of months ago, and he maintains that liminality is 95% of the game in financial planning, because we all have money scripts, and those money scripts are hidden away, and we need to bring them out. He uses internal family systems for the work that he does. But it really makes sense to me that the technical side of financial planning, which is where most planners spend 97% of their time, is only 5% of the solution.
It is mind-blowing. And Rick was a great thinker, a great experience with all of that. And you know, if your orientation for a profession is your value system and your measurements for success or numbers, it makes sense that we have evolved this way. But even behavioral finance ignores liminality.
Yeah.
So these great bodies of work, life planning, great body of work, it ignores liminality. It's one thing to say, to discover who you are and to prepare yourself for these life events and to have confidence and know how you're going to spend your time or what you're going to learn. And there's some really good thinking around it. None of that is really preparing someone for this other experience, which is really like, to me, it's the deep undercurrents in a river. You look at a river or, maybe a smaller, like even a brook or something that you can kind of get your arms around, and you see it moving one way, but something else is happening. It could look calm and easy, but underneath there are the currents that really determine the direction of the river, the ultimate destination. It seems to me that the liminal space this is my concern with it, because I think it's so profound and so well documented. It's universal, but our tendency in the world we live in is to name it, write some scripts on how to deal with it, and equations and timelines and measurables from the outside, not from the internal client experience. If we value it in a profession, we want to kind of own it. And this is not to be owned. That makes it even tougher.
Well, I think that doing this correctly is really hard work, because you have to give up the expert role and become a thinking partner with someone who is in that space and is interested in having a navigator help them get through that space. It is something that we as professionals don't do very well. We believe that our clients are hiring us for our expertise. The truth is, our clients are hiring us for the outcome that they want to get. And they don't care about our expertise, especially unless they're not getting what they want. And then they start, looking at that. I think this is just, something that's just popped into my head. So it's not well thought out.
That kind of thinking works around liminality because it really is so wide open. It's hard to pin it down. The process of trying to pin it down could be a useful process if you hold it lightly, because you may find different answers or different speed bumps or brick walls that you go with. The other thing that's interesting about liminality is it takes a while. probably years, not months. So that's that. I think nature encourages us to experience. The culture says expedite. The profession says expedite. And the profession's pretty good about putting names around things that could sound very human, but the business model is not so easy with this. We were just looking at this, Josh, at our mid-year conference, and I love so much the session that you did at that conference.
Oh, thank you.
Was really intrigued with it. I'm sure they'll listen to the recording many times. But when we get to the liminal part of it, I was introducing to, this is for people listening, this is a collection of financial planners from, I don't know, 4 or 5 countries were with us. So culture is a little bit different. But we are embarking on creating a specific level of training for liminal space. And again, because you can't own it, you are the thinking partner. I like your term navigator. I think of with that immediately what hit me was the client is the pilot and their financial transitionist is the navigator. So helping them see where they are at each time, but they fly the plane. So we've done a fair amount of work with that. But then, it comes down to how do you deliver that experience of a thinking partner, navigator, someone to help move through this space, which is years. And it isn't like, I'm sure people listening to this, if you think back to a life event, and if you really give yourself some time, it may seem like it took a couple of years for you to really get settled into this. That's not unusual. But it's not awful. Widows tell us that the first 2 years are the toughest. And after that, they're transforming into their selves. And so it's studied more than many of the other transition experiences. The question was, how do you even introduce the concept to a client who has just gone through a financial shift of some sort and is putting things into order? How do you? And I think it starts with a conversation about liminality and wondering, having someone wonder if they are really ready for that. Do they really want to engage this way?
And there's nothing that says you have to. This is, it's okay if somebody, at least in my opinion, it's okay if someone says, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to get through this as fast as possible. They're not going to get as good a result, but it is their life. Again, they're the pilot. They get to control where we're going. And if they choose that they want to go through fast, and we are willing to help them, and that's the big thing, is that we don't have to say yes to everybody. It's okay to say, I'm not the right person for you.
That's so true. But it's also, how do we get brain? And I think the first step is to have a conversation about it before you get into designing a process.
Yes.
It's to recognize that it's not just a one and done. Okay, the money is there, this is there, the house is here, boom. It starts with a really big question that I use this question myself as I go through my own liminal times. Some of it is right now. The question is, what do you want to protect? As life is moving and shifting and reforming and transforming, what is it that feels that you need to always make sure is protected? And what is that? What does it look like? And that's the kind of question. If you stay in that question and you can really answer that, it gives you some Well, I go back to the navigator. The navigator knows how to keep her plane safe while the pilot is flying. So you know the safety. There's something to be protected, and everyone involved in this experience, this project, knows what that is. So that's you go back and look at that. Other one is to really identify what are the anchors, what is really true for you. And it could be integrity issues, it could be health issues, it could be something with relationships. But find a couple of anchors that you can always touch base with when you're considering choices. How does this show up? How does this keep this part of my life that I want to protect? How is that? So you have your own, you with a guide, you identify these touch points through a process. Someone gave me the great terminology of anchoring. And the idea was a ship out in the ocean with that weather coming, weather changing. You can't outrun it. What you do is you change your anchors. You stop going forward and you put anchors out to stabilize during the rough weather. Doesn't mean that you eliminated it. You've just survived it, and you survived it well enough to then be on your way. So what are the anchors that you would throw out to stabilize yourself during this? These are really important conversations to have with your thinking partner. And there, but the thing is, like, it's open. There may be one answer right now, but 6 months later, there may be a different way of understanding that answer, or the answer has changed because there's a reforming that's happening.
So it seems to me, Susan, excuse me, the motivating or skill that the navigator really needs to become great at is asking questions. I call it my Aristotelian method of helping people, where Aristotle never gave an answer, he only asked questions. And I find that if I can stay in the questions, we have a much more positive conversation because the person I'm speaking with knows everything we're talking about is them and not me. And one of the things I think is probably true, but takes a while to get there, is we all have the answers to the issues that we're facing. Our job is to help people discover that, I think. And that's a liminal space.
You're reminding me of that question. Don't know where I got it in the last 30 years, but I don't know that it's original. But the question was, but if you did know the answer to this, what would it be?
That's me, by the way. That was
from you.
That's for me. This is my methodology for helping people learn that mistakes are okay. And that if we learn from our mistakes, they're the best things in the world. If we don't learn from our mistakes, it's just a waste of time. So I would ask people, say, okay, why do you think, what about this do you think caused it to happen? And the answer usually is, I don't know. My next question, well, if you did know, what would the answer be?
Okay, that sounds like you.
And yes, and often the person I'm speaking with will say, I don't know. So then I have a third question to follow that up, which is, why don't you just make up an answer? It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Just make up something and tell me what comes to mind first. And guess what that is? It's usually the answer to the question. And I find it's a relatively gentle way to have a very difficult conversation.
I can see that. What I see follows that. Be done in large step. But I can say personally, and from my experience over the decades of doing this, the conversations that are illuminating, like Pierce, I would say that's a conversation that's illuminating. Someone has discovered and articulated something important that was the direction. One of the things that happens next to in my head is to put it into some kind of a visual, to reconnect to recall, to use to go forward. And over time, we've gone through lots of what we call one-pager exercises, but the work that is working right now, and again, I use this myself, is to do the we call it quadrant. You basically just draw a cube and put four cubes inside. And going from upper left, right is what is changing, what needs to be protected, what are the choices, and what are the next steps. And that can change 100 times. But it's a way of pulling the attention into this conversation and putting it into a format that then can be used and changed and massaged. And it's sometimes I personally will remember parts, but I won't remember the whole. So if I'm looking at this, then I could look at it the next month and say, wait a second, those aren't really the choices. The choices more look like this, or the next step. But it becomes a focal point that a guide and a person going through transition can share and keep it open-ended, keep it organic.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Susan, unfortunately, we're out of time. Yes. And I didn't get to the question I wanted to ask you, which is liminality in death, which is a whole different conversation that would take probably 10 minutes. We don't have it, but that will be something I would like to revisit with you at some point. And yeah, and I think it would be to me, it's one of the interesting mysteries of our life. What happens when we die? There is that liminal space. There is that space where the person dying is talking to people we don't see, but they see very clearly. And, people have had near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences like I have, or using psychedelics to help, with guided journeys, and they get to that stuff. So that'll be a conversation for another time. But at any rate, Susan, how would people find you?
The easiest way to remember is southernplanning.com. It's Financial Transitionist Institute.com. And from there, you can link over. For my email address is susan@southernplanning.com. I think it's simple that way. I'm always interested in conversations, random conversations, friend conversations, because I'm on an ongoing learning journey with this. So every conversation has a little opening for me to learn something new.
You just brought up a really good point, Susan. We're all learners on this journey. The Long Strange Trip is not about expert opinion. It's about asking interesting questions that bring more questions behind it and more questions behind it. And eventually we start seeing a different way of how the world might work. So that's our whole purpose here, and you just encapsulated it beautifully. I have two things I'd like you to do. One is please go and give us an honest rating and review. If you love this podcast, give us 5 stars wherever you're listening to it. If you hate us, give us 1 star, and I'll just cry a little bit, but that's okay. And the second thing is, if you liked what you heard on this podcast or any other episode we have and you think you'd be a good guest for us, please send me an email at jpatrick@stage2solution.com. That's the number 2 and solution is singular, jpatrick@stage2solution.com. And we'll set up a time to talk and see if being a guest on this podcast will be right for you. I'm always looking for interesting people I've not met, and that's the whole purpose for me with this is I love doing podcasts because I get to talk to interesting people about interesting things, and that makes my day. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Susan Bradley. You're at the Long Strange Trip podcast. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here for our next episode. Thanks for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate you being part of this journey. I'd be grateful if you'd leave an honest rating and review. It helps other people find these conversations, lets me know what's landing with you and what isn't. If you love the show, give us 5 stars. And if you hate it, give it 1 star and I'll just cry a little bit. Keep asking the hard questions. Keep being honest about what's difficult. And remember, we're all just trying to figure this out together. I'll talk to you next time on the Long Strange Trip. Thanks for stopping by.